Hey everybody, you're watching Cadroll Hunter, and I am super excited to show you what's in this container. No, it's not chewing gum. You gotta look under the lid. We got a whole bunch of silver. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is James and you're watching my channel Cadroll Hunter, and I've got a bunch of silver here, this little chewing gum container of silver that I got from my antique dealer, Tim. This is exactly how it came, in a thing of chewing gum. He put it in my hands just like this. I opened it up and I thought, this looks awesome. It is silver. There's a lot of 50-cent pieces, and I think at the bottom there are some $1 coins. Now, silver has been going absolutely nuts. I think everybody knows that. And I'm a little bit behind. I actually bought this in June. I paid $510 for everything that's in here. And you know what? That seems like a lot for a little container, but that's actually just under $25 per dollar face value. So it was actually $24.87, $20.50 face in here. And that's probably about the most I'd been spending on any sort of silver. I've been lucky to get it for $15 face for a long time. And that was actually well below spot. But today's price is so much higher. At the time of filming right now, we're looking at a spot price of silver of $63.36 per ounce, per troy ounce. That is really crazy. And you probably know that one silver dollar is 0.6 of a troy ounce. So that means that the spot price for a dollar face right now is actually $38.02. So this has already appreciated significantly since I bought it. But you don't want to hear me chit-chatting about it. We want to take a look and see what we got. So I'm gonna just dump some of this stuff out here on my mat here. Oh, and you gotta love that sound of silver. That is awesome. And there's some chunky stuff at the bottom. Look at all of that. And we got some older stuff in here too, at least a couple. I say a couple of older ones. We'll talk about these ones, but these are gonna be sterling silver. That's pretty awesome. So I'm gonna get this organized by denomination and then again by year. We're going to take a look and see what we got. Did we get any varieties? Did we get anything that is worth more than just melt? So I've turned all of my overhead lights on. I have a bunch here, and I didn't follow my own rule for making sure we got a well-lit space. So all the lights are on. You can probably see the coins a bit better now. I got everything laid out here now. The $1 on the top, and then all the 50-cent pieces. We've got three different monarchs. We've got Queen Elizabeth, and then we have King George VI and King George V, which is just awesome. You can see that one's a bit damaged, but we're going to start with the silver dollars. We got 4 silver dollars. This is the nicest one right here. This is some chunky silver. So this is exactly 0.6 of a troy ounce of silver, which is really wicked. And this has the a more modern portrait of Queen Elizabeth. Well, for the 60s, I suppose, at least for these ones here. In any case, there are 2 varieties in the 1966 we want to look for. There is the common large bead, and then there is the less common, very valuable small bead. And you'd always want to check it. You just never know if you're going to find one of those. I'll throw this one under the scope and we'll take a quick little peek here. So here are the beads on the rim. Now, the obvious difference between the small bead and the large bead is, well, yeah, the size of the bead. So the small beads are going to be smaller. The large beads are going to be bigger. You pass that, you're going to do well. But they're hard to tell all on their own, and I've got the Charlton catalog here, which is always really helpful, and we've got some pictures. We can see the large bead on the left and the small bead on the right. So when you're comparing the two directly, you can easily see that the small beads are smaller, but when you're only looking at one, it's really hard to know. What we want to look at is the position of the bead. If we only have one, the large bead, which is what we have here, is going to have a larger bead, and this one here is a little to the left, so it's not centered. The small bead is going to have a smaller bead, but it's pretty much directly centered over the eye in Regina. That's what we're looking at. We've got 4 to check. Now, if we found one, even in a circulated condition, it would be worth thousands of dollars, the small bead variety that is. So you know, it's a bit of wishful thinking, but everybody who has ever found one probably got surprised. We'll look at the rest of these here. So I'll throw these under and let's see. That one is definitely a large bead to the left of the eye. The next one, most certainly off to the left again. And then our last one, I just got to rotate it around to Regina. So all of these are the large bead. That's okay. We've added some chunky silver to our silver stack, and I love doing that. And you got to love that sound of silver. So moving on, we got a bunch of 50-cent pieces. These are all the Laureate portrait with the newer coat of arms of Canada. So this was updated, and you can see below that was the older style, quite a bit larger. This is my favorite design by far, I have to say that. But this is the updated one, and we got some 59s, 60s, 61s, 62s, 63s. This is the nicest of the 63s here. A little bit of toning on there, some yellows on the edges. And 64. So these are all the Laureate portrait. So that's our second portrait here. And that's awesome. None of these have any varieties worth noting, and all of these are pretty much just worth melt. So there's no more valuable variety, and that means that even in an uncirculated condition, you might find these in the junk silver bin. So if you're looking to upgrade your collection, that might be a place to start, because if they're not graded and they're raw, then you might find a really nice 62 or 63 in the junk silver if you're fortunate enough to be close to a coin store or a silver dealer that's going to sell those. Now, prior to 1959, the older design was what prevailed, and we have some 1953s and we have a couple of 1957s. Still the Laureate portrait, but that older design. That's a pretty nice looking coin. These are well, the 57 is a common date. Again, it's just worth silver price. But there are some varieties in the 53. They typically go for a bit over melt. We're going to look at these guys and see what we've got. If you watch my channel, you know that there are some varieties in all the denominations of the 1953. That's what we're going to look at here. Now, here are the varieties in the 1953 in the Charlton Standard Catalog. There is the shoulder fold and no shoulder fold. And then there's a large date and a small date. And we got three to check here. Got the first one under the scope. Now these ones are a little bit more circulated. So we're lacking some of the detail, and it's going to be a little bit harder to discern the shoulder fold. But what we can look at is the lettering. And you can see there's some rim damage on this one as well. But this is going to be the no shoulder fold. It's got more flared letters here. And the other element to look for is whether it is the large date or the small date. And this here is the small date. The marker to look at, of course, like the 1966 beads, the large date is simply larger. But when you only have one to compare, there are differences to note. The large date, the tail of the 9 here comes down quite a bit further. This one is kind of tucked in. So this is the small date, 1953 no shoulder fold. We'll check the other two. So this next one here, also pretty circulated, also the no shoulder fold. Again, we can see that flared serif lettering then, or there. This is also the small date, so those two varieties. And then the last one, this one here is going to be the shoulder fold. We can tell that because this eye here is slim and it lacks those sort of flared ends. We'll flip it over here, and we're going to see that this guy is actually the large date. This date is quite a bit bigger. The 9 sweeps down, and I wonder if we can get both of them in frame here to look at and compare those dates. Might still be a little bit hard to tell here, but you can see the difference in the 9. This 9 sweeps down, and it's actually slimmer at the base. That's the big part to tell, I think. But if you were to really compare them, this 3 here is going to be taller than the 3 above it there. So we got 2 different varieties, and that's always cool. I love looking for varieties when we have a number of these things to look at. The one that would have carried a bit more value would have been the no shoulder fold large date. And We didn't get that. So I think in this condition here, these are probably worth melt or maybe just a little bit more. The one that's damaged for sure, just melt. That's probably why it was in the sort of with the junk silver, so to speak. If we had found the large date no shoulder fold in an AU50 though, like a really nice one, it would have been about a $50 coin and perhaps more now because silver has really gone up in price. So I think the value of the higher grade coins tends to move up when the value of the lower grade coins in a junk or scrap condition go up as well. Okay, moving back in time, we got a couple 1940s here, a 42, 43, 44, 45, and some 1951s. These are all going to feature King George VI. And you'll notice here that these are much more worn because back in the 40s and the 50s, these actually circulated. People used these for transactions. When I was a kid, back in the 80s, 50-cent pieces were really not circulating coins. It was a really rare treat to see them. You wouldn't really spend them. You wouldn't get them. So maybe I would get one at Christmas or something like that as a gift. But they weren't the kind of thing you would have in your piggy bank and go to the store and buy a popsicle with. Because that's what I used to do. Take my change and go buy popsicles. So there are some varieties though we can find here, and it all has to do with the last digit of the date. And that's because all of the dates were hand punched onto the die. That is, the last digit was. So the hub would have had 194, and they would have stamped those dies with the hub, and then they would have hand stamped onto the die the last number. And they would have used that master hub to create the dies for multiple years. That's what they would have done back there. They stopped doing that at one point in time, but it means that we've got some varieties where the position of that last number is either what we would call, in this case, a near zero or a far zero. Basically, it's just how close is it to the other digit. Now, before we take a closer look, I just want to mention something that's very interesting to note, is that this is the older version of the Charlton Standard Catalog. This is the 2023 edition, and it highlights these varieties from 41 and every year right up until 1951 when they stopped, I guess 1953, when they stopped hand punching the last digit. So that's interesting. And I love looking for these varieties, and in my own collection, I've noted which are the near or the far or the wide or the narrow or however you want to do it. But in the most recent catalog, they actually stopped doing that. So they don't list those varieties for any years other than just 43 and 44. And if you look through, we don't really see that information in here into the 50s like we did. And I think the reason for that is because none of them are any more valuable really than another, and it's pretty arbitrary. These were just hand punched onto the die, so you're going to get one that's near or far. There wasn't any what that were particularly rare, or only a handful were done this way or that way. So I think they just took that complexity out of this because it didn't really have any impact on the prices. And the catalog itself is perhaps primarily a price guide, and so it didn't really have an impact. But I still like to look for those variations, and we'll do that here anyhow. There's our 1942. This might be considered the near to or the narrow date because this too is hunched in pretty closely. The wide date probably has this too right up into the hoof here of the, well, you'd have to scroll it down to see that that is a unicorn. And we have unicorns all over Canada if you haven't seen them. Here's the 1943, and we would consider this one to be the narrow date or the close 3 because that 3 is tucked right in there. And again, it's not really close to that hoof, which we might see in the wide date. One to pay close attention to is the 1944. We'll throw this one under the scope like we are with the rest because there is one with some tripling on the last 4 here. It's the 4 over 4 over 4. It would have been repunched perhaps. I don't see any of that here, so we don't have it, but I've found it in the past in junk silver. So you want to look closely for the evidence of another stem of a 4 down here. That is your surefire sign. We don't see that here. And this is probably a wide date. We see this 4 is right up into the hoof there. That's actually pretty cool. And this one here would be considered a narrow date or the near 4 because the 4 is tucked up pretty close to this 4. In the wide date variety, this 4 is like right jammed up into the hoof of the weird animal that we really actually don't have here in Canada. I've actually seen a unicorn, but it makes total sense that it's on our coat of arms, right? Here's the 1945, and this includes another variety that is no longer listed in the Charlton Standard Catalog, and that is the difference between the blunt 5 and the pointed 5. And there are versions of this that come to a narrow point and some that come to a blunt point. This one here is actually the pointed 5, but I think it's got a little bit of damage that's just pushed that down. If we look in the Charlton catalog, there is the blunt 5. It's actually quite a bit more blunt. You can see what we've got is a pointed 5. And this is probably going to be the narrow date version because that hoof is just touching, but the wide date is going to be jammed right up again in the hoof. And we had two 1951s to check, and you can see they both pretty much look the same. The one is pretty much in the same position, so it's really neither here nor there. Again, they're really both worth melt, and they're both worth pretty much the same amount no matter what. But it's cool to look for these varieties. If we found one where there's a much bigger gap between the 5 and the 1, I would still flip it up and call that the wide date because it's just cool to see these types of varieties. Now the last two here are the oldies. So we've got silver that is over 100 years old, and that is really cool. There is a 1917, and there is George V. That is a pretty dandy looking coin. That is going to be more than melt value. So this is sterling silver, so that's cool. But we still have lots of detail on here. You can see it's certainly worn. We don't have the full band of the crown. So this could still be, anywhere in, just low VG maybe. But it is still a good coin, and it's got a legible date. That was an issue on these ones, is that the date was sometimes harder to read. It's got some marks and nicks and things like that. But that is really cool. And that's just minted at 752,213. So under $1 million. That's really, really cool. Now this next one is pretty cool for a couple of reasons. This is a 1914, and you can see how much of the face of the coin, the detail has actually been worn off there. That's pretty common. Again, this is also sterling silver, but this one has been heavily damaged. It's a bit unfortunate because this one is actually a really low mint coin. 1914, this is minted at just 160,128. Now this is in a pretty bad condition with all of this damage. Even without the damage on here, this would really be like in a G condition. And in a G condition, it's still would be a $25 coin. This is why it's in the junk silver, because it's damaged. So it's really just worth its silver melt. But yeah, if we were fortunate enough to find this in a mint state 60, okay, a mint state 60, this would be a $3,500 coin. Even in an AU 50, it lists at $1,600. Now, why it's so widely different from a G is because most of these are just really heavily circulated. They're so rare in those higher mint states that they really, really command a premium. It's about scarcity and demand. But it's really cool to find an old coin here, a 1914 sterling silver. This could be a collection hole filler for somebody for sure, even in a damaged condition, because this one would be a lot harder to find, and you're rarely going to find something like this in the junk silver bin. I said at the outset that I picked these up a few months ago. It was in June, and right now we're in September when I'm filming this. It might be the beginning of October by the time this video is actually released. And silver has just been on a tear. So I spent $510 on all of this, and it was already a pretty good discount on the melt price, just under $25 per $1 face. And I just plugged it all into the CoinApps website, which is cool. I'll put the link below, but at today's price, $63.37 per troy ounce Canadian. I plugged it all in here, all the coins that I had, 4 silver dollars, 23 Elizabeth, 8 King George VI and 2 George V 50-cent pieces. And this is today's melt value, $785.05, which is awesome because even if I tried to sell this right now today, I'd make a profit. I probably wouldn't get this full melt value if I took this to a dealer. They need some margins as well. But this is an investment, even just in the short term, that has done really, really well. Now, anyone could guess at where silver is going to go. Is it going to go to $100? Is it going to go back down to $40? We just don't know. In any case, right now it looks like a really smart decision on my part. We can look again in a few months and see where things stand. It might look different at that point in time. But for me, adding some silver to my collection is always a fun thing to do. It can be a bit speculative if you're hoping to profit, but I'm not really looking to sell these. I'm looking to hold on to these. They're a long-term store of value for me, and I love old coins. So it really puts a couple of things together for me that makes sense. So I really hope you enjoyed taking a look at some old silver. We got stuff from Queen Elizabeth. We got stuff from King George VI and his dad, King George V. Couple oldies here. Always lots of fun to find some old silver. I really appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate it every single time. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic to have your support and encouragement on my videos. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, Cateroll Hunter, please click the subscribe button and you'll find out when my new videos come out. I have new videos coming out all the time. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time. The sponsors of today's video are Lighthouse Canada and the Charlton Press. Lighthouse Canada is the leading supplier of high-quality numismatic supplies in Canada, and the Charlton Press is the leading publisher of coin and paper money catalogs and price guides for Canadian collectors. Go check out their online stores today and use the exclusive discount code CRH20 for 20% off all your purchases.